So, hi everyone, welcome. I'm so excited about this event. My name is Tania Lizarazo. I'm the director of the Critical Disability Studies minor, who's organizing this event with the Human Context of Science and Technology program. We've done cool events in the past, so please follow us on my UMBC to see what's coming. This event is also co-sponsored by Accessibility and Disability Services and the Designing Participatory Futures Research Lab. And the title of this event is Disabling Intelligences, AI's Eugenics Problem is Our Eugenics Problem. And we have with us Rua M. Williams, who's an assistant professor in the School of Applied and Creative Computing at Purdue University and a former JOSTEC fellow with the Social Science Research Council. As principal investigator of the Collaboration Lab, Dr. Williams' work explores how disabled people imagine and build their own socio-technical worlds. Together with their students, they investigate how technology policy and research practice interact to disrupt disabled people's bodily autonomy and access to meaningful public life. Through their scholarship, they illustrate injustice in technology and uplift marginalized people's own practices of technosocial resistance. Dr. Williams' book, Disabling Intelligences, Legacies of Eugenics and How We Are Wrong About AI, is available from Palgrave Macmillan. So thanks so much, Rua, and I want to ask Blake to tell us a little bit about HCSC.
Hi, thanks. And thanks so much, Ruav, for being here. I think this is going to be a wonderful interdisciplinary event that I can already tell from who's here is bringing people from all of different areas of campus. I wanted to let students, especially students, but also faculty know about the Human Context of Science and Technology program, which is an upper division certificate program here at UMBC. So for students in the humanities and also in science, engineering, computer science, information systems, and all other areas on campus, there's something for you at HCST in terms of studying the intersections of society, culture, history, and science and technology. So if you're interested in the certificate, I will put our website in the chat, and you're more than welcome to contact me if you have any questions. And for faculty, we're sort of taking an open and rotating call for affiliate faculty. So if you are interested in the intersections of science and technology in your research or teaching here on campus, please see our website and put in an application to become an affiliate faculty member. And finally, I wanted to sort of thank the Critical Disability Studies minor for once again co-sponsoring an event that is just a sort of perfect intersection between like our multidisciplinary, transdisciplinary topics. So I really look forward to the conversation. And we'll turn it over to you, Ruha. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh, it's my turn. Hello, everyone. I just wanted to give a few disclaimers. First of all, I am hiding in my attic because I have children, and that means that my laptop is on my lap, which means that it moves. And I'm sorry about that because I know that for some people that doesn't feel good to look at. So look away. And also, I am very jet lagged because I returned from Japan the other day, and that's the worst time zone. So hello. Anyway, I will begin to share my slides and talk at you now, and we will hopefully have fun together. I hope this works because I didn't do the thing yet. That's the wrong slide, obviously. Don't look at that. Stop asking for that. Okay, I'm sorry. No, thank you. Even though I like that feature, they won't actually give it to me. So they ask me to do it and then they won't give it to me. Go. Can you please do the part where you present? Okay, now you're on the wrong page because you're so nice and helpful. I really appreciate you. Don't look. There's a goose. Sorry. I could just be more dysfunctional, that'd be great. Okay, hello everybody. This is Disabling Intelligences. AI's eugenics problem is our eugenics problem. Basically, I took the twist of the book and made it the subtitle of this presentation so that you don't have to wonder what we're talking about today. I'm extremely online, and you can find me at these handles on various social media platforms. If you don't find me under one, then try the other one. Well, I just want to start with you're wrong about what's in this talk. And so for those of you that have read the book, each chapter has a little you're wrong about or we are wrong about subtitle for fun. And the story behind that is that the original pitch for the book, the title was going to be certainly here are all the ways we are wrong about AI. But they wanted me to be more academic, so here we are. But, you know, this isn't about how all AI is bad or evil or about how AI researchers are bad. It's not about us as individual people or the choices that you make or whether or not you use AI. It's about all of us. It's about our collective culture and society and how the choices that we have made have led us to this moment and that we can make new choices. Just I guess an overview as I'm going to try to give a very brief introduction to eugenics and AI because I could take the whole hour on just that and I don't want to. And then we'll go over some sort of conceits in the argument for AI. And those would be things like wrong direction, will decide, something I call the disability diversion, and orphan crushing machines. All of these things will make sense to you if you've never heard of them before. We will talk about it. And then I will give you the framework that is about how we can make different choices. While I personally would probably want to see AI completely abolished and dismantled, I don't actually think we're going to do that. And so I'd like us to make different choices instead. I'm not going to pretend like I don't stand up in front of the mirror every morning and go, I hate Sam Altman. I do. Okay. So I'm going to start with some definitions of AI because the definition of AI has been changing basically every 2 weeks. And what happens is everything that used to be considered something else is now being labeled as AI because it's convenient, because it gets access to venture capital, because it gets access to federal funding. And so we're losing sight of like what we're talking about when we talk about AI. And a lot of us will be talking about it and mean something else, right? So, you know, AI, artificial intelligence began to be discussed in the 1950s as sort of like a way of replicating and mechanizing basically human decision-making, human-like intellect, for lack of a better word. In the 90s, there was what was sort of called an AI winter, which was actually where funding and support for AI was declining, but actually in video games, it was still sort of hiding in video games as like the thing that drives game logic. It was also still working out for understanding how we use robots and things like that. So there was this sort of tendency for AI to shelter in winter in entertainment industries. Then in the 2010s, we started talking about machine learning and probability associations, and that began to be called AI. And it wasn't necessarily actually what people in the 1950s were talking about, but it became trendy again to call it AI. And now, you know, ever since like 2022, when people say AI, they're pretty much thinking about LLMs. They're pretty much thinking about ChatGPT in particular, but Claude, Gemini, etc., DeepSeek, all those things. Also, obviously, the generative images, which are things like Stable Diffusion, Midjourney, etc., and even those are now being co-opted into LLMs because the LLMs are giving you the interface to the generative images. And so people have stopped even thinking about the distinction between an LLM and an image generator because the interface is the same now. So in the book, I give some categories for AI that help us think about what we're talking about when we talk about AI. I'm not going to go through the definition of all the little categories here because they were just cheeky ways to talk about things. But I will just say a working definition of AI that sort of encompasses all of the things that we have taken in and subsumed to AI is just sort of sets of decision trees or logical rule sets and statistical methods that are applied to large data sets to make an inference or a guess about a current condition. So these are just big boxes of math that help us decide things. Some things that are called AI that were not called AI 5 years ago or 10 years ago, decision matrices. So that would be much more like the logic that's in a video game. Apologies for my notification sound that just went off. Signal processing. So the way that the auto captions are working, now people will call it AI, but it's just signal processing. We're processing in audio, turning it into phonemes and processing those into text based on whatever language it is that we are listening for. And computer vision. So like the bottom image here in the bottom right, where you have like a street scene where different objects of interest are highlighted as and labeled as different things. That is based on both interpreting pixels as feature sets and deciding what they are, but that decision about what they are is based on human beings labeling over and over again a bunch of image sets. Anything that predicts the image generators and the chatbots, all of these things are being called AI now, and they weren't all always called that. And that's just something to be aware of. You can't assume that you're talking about the same thing. And so when you're trying to have a conversation with somebody, you have to get on the same page about what you mean, or you're not having a conversation. Just a general division between like what these different things are. The good old-fashioned AI of the 1950s, you can consider as like a replication of human action through simulation and rule setting. The algorithmic decision-making systems, which are really what the machine learning models tend to be used for, are these ways of approximating human decisions based on statistical analysis of thousands of past human decisions and probabilistic comparisons. So you have a big data set of human decisions and you label it with more human decisions, and then you can do statistics on it and get an idea about what would the human decision be, maybe. Even generative AI is a probabilistic way of generating the most likely combination of successor objects. So we call them tokens that can be words or pixels, and that's based again on these human linked prompts between words and data. I don't know if I talk about this here or not. Okay, I'm gonna do this because I don't know if people know this, but do you remember when AI was really bad at fingers and teeth? Where like not only could you like there would be too many fingers, and there still are sometimes, but there was also like way too many teeth. And the reason for that is if you're looking at an image, what is most likely to be next to a finger? Another finger. So the image generators were having trouble figuring out when to stop making fingers and teeth. And so one of the ways that they resolved this was they did more sort of a recursive coming out and coming back in of focus and doing a sort of classification of features and being like, okay, we have enough fingers maybe. It still gets it wrong sometimes, but it's less wrong now. And that's why. It's because it did more of this scoping, tiny and big searching. I'm trying not to be too technical, so I'm using very weird words. Okay, so, you know, we need to have a discussion about what eugenics is, because I think a lot of people do not know what eugenics is. Now, if you've read the book, then you've learned a lot of things about what eugenics is. But this has always been a problem with this conversation that I try to have, because people have a very narrow view of what eugenics is, okay? They often view eugenics as sort of the bottom of this list, okay? So the extermination of people based on their having quote unquote undesirable characteristics, or even infanticide, so of babies that have quote unquote undesirable characteristics. But incarceration is also a form of eugenics. There's a very good book about this by Jess Whatcott. And I'll give you the cover of the book later in the talk. But also there are other forms of incarceration besides criminal or whatever incarceration. Also, state hospitals and mental institutions are forms of incarceration. Sterilization is also one of those more obvious kinds of eugenics if you're thinking of sterilizing people that are quote unquote undesirable. But what people stop thinking about as eugenics is the selective breeding, or what we call the quote unquote positive eugenics. So the eugenics that doesn't result in death sometimes gets a pass as either being acceptable eugenics or not really eugenics. But this is where we get ourselves into trouble, because this is where we wind up with the Nazis like raw milk for some reason, because it makes them super healthy. They think it actually makes you kind of dead, but that's fine. So these are all things that kind of come into eugenics, but there's more. And when you understand the more, you understand how all of these specific things come into play. I'm not actually going to read everything on this slide because it's too long, but I wanted to give you a timeline of eugenics to help you see that it starts well before Nazi Germany, and it starts before even the coining of the word eugenics. Okay, so eugenic actions, you can find ancient examples of eugenic actions. You just don't necessarily know that that's what's going on, but we can definitely point to the Indian Civilization Act as eugenic actions. Even before we knew or had a word for what we were doing, we were trying to purify and exterminate a race through a cultural genocide. And then here I want you to see a timeline that eugenics didn't stop. Because a lot of people associate eugenics with Nazi Germany and think it started there and ended there, and it did not. A lot of people also don't know about, within Nazi Germany, the Action T4 program was actually sort of the trial program for what would the society tolerate. And society tolerated the murder of 300,000 disabled people. And they used that as a launching pad for exterminating other people. And, you know, the I could say this one day, but not today. Anti-miscegnation laws. The thing about not being able to marry people that aren't the same color as you, that's also a eugenic law. Ugly laws. These are things about not being disabled in public, basically, and they were sort of disproportionately deployed against people of color, as basically anything that they could decide was being indecent in public, they could lock you away for. The last one wasn't abolished until 1976, so we were still, and now a lot of homeless laws are actually just ugly laws rebranded. And then, you know, the pre-existing condition issues in health insurance is a eugenics law. The way that we handled COVID was eugenics. And the Make America Healthy Again executive order is eugenics. Literally classified autistic people as a threat to the American way of life. So not super excellent. But let's tie these things together. What is eugenics to AI? Aubrey Clayton has some very good work that helps us understand that statistics was built for eugenics by eugenicists. And if you know anything about machine learning and even signal processing, AI relies on statistics. Various categories of AI rely on statistics to function. It's statistics inside that black box that we don't understand. The TASC-GRIL bundle, this reporting was done by Tim Mintger-Brew and Emily Torres, and this is about a various alphabet of post-eugenicist thoughts that are actually still eugenicist at heart. The transhumanists, the exproprianists, the cosmists, the realists, the rationalists, I think, the effective altruists and the long-termists. There's just lots of words for new eugenicists, okay? They basically, at their heart, believe that the human race can be perfected through some kind of marriage with technology, and oftentimes it even results in the absence of any humans at all, and everybody just becomes digital. And that's why they'll make choices that will kill lots of people today, because they've imagined a bunch of imaginary digital people in the future that deserve to live more than you. And this is not like some kind of conspiracy theory. The people that fund AI will tell you that they are from these categories and that they believe these things. So what are some examples of how AI today leads to eugenic consequences? I'm not going to read this text. I just want it there for you. If you want to know some things, you can look at how organizations like DREDF and ProPublica have done investigations into eugenic effects of AI. They don't necessarily call it that, but you can find lots of reporting on this. When we do embed computer vision systems into very large robots, i.e. cars, that can cause bodily damage to things that they collide with, We are making eugenic choices about what things in the environment are worth colliding with and what are not. When we don't understand enough about the variety of human embodiment, then we classify human beings as trash cans. And that's a big problem. So even when we believe that we've accounted for disabled people, we're often thinking of it in a very narrow way. So for example, the classic example is that we could identify a bicycle and we could identify a person, and we could identify a person riding a bicycle, but we could not identify a person walking a bicycle. Okay, that was an accident that actually happened. Now we can identify a person in a wheelchair, and we can identify a wheelchair moving forward, but we can't identify a person in a wheelchair moving in a direction with their feet backwards. Like, it makes the incorrect prediction about the velocity of that object and then hits it. But if you've ever actually been in any subway, you'll see a lot of people that use wheelchairs, and you'll see them push themselves backwards in order to maneuver around the platform. That's very common. And then the classic compass example about recidivism rate prediction, where technically race, quote unquote, was not a category in the algorithm, but it was being produced anyway. This disproportionate impact on people of color, particularly people in poor Black neighborhoods, because the way that it was determining whether or not you were likely to recommit was based on like location data of where you lived. Well, if you lived in a place that was over policed, then technically it would show that you would be likely to recommit just because you lived in a place where they were constantly creating offenders just by being there. And as I mentioned, and as Jess Wetcott explains, incarceration is also eugenics. This is happening in services and health, public services and health. And this is the thing that people also don't understand, is these are not like threats for the future. These are things that are already happening and have been happening for a number of years. So when we're worried about like what danger does AI pose? Like, the cat's already out of the bag. The AI cat has been doing lots of murder already. Insurance companies have been employing algorithmic decision-making systems in their benefits determinations for a number of years. They have been killing people. I have literally watched them kill my friends. I have watched my friends get a denial and say out loud, "This will kill me," and then watch them die over the next year. And we have seen informal and formal policies exacerbate and accelerate the death of disabled people during the COVID-19 pandemic. And all of these decisions were eugenic in nature. In particular, the idea that certain people were more worthy of being saved. The idea that if you already had a quote unquote poor quality of life, that there was no reason to give you a ventilator. This was particularly ironic because, first of all, we don't actually know somebody's quality of life based on their embodiment. That's not accurate. Second of all, life is life. And third of all, if you survive COVID, you're disabled now. Like, so it's really weird. You're basically trading disabled people for other disabled people. And it's like, anyway, there's no correct choice, but certainly proceduralizing it is not morally correct. We'll talk more about what it actually means to do these things in triage, because I don't mean to condemn people making choices during actual crisis, because that's not what I'm saying. The other big thing that is happening that I was really infuriated about how much more of this was happening than even I realized, but this vaporware problem is quite large. And what I mean by this is, if you know what vaporware is, it's basically the concept of a technology that becomes obsolete and basically unsupported. But in this case, it is technology that is embedded and sometimes implanted into human bodies, and it's becoming vaporware because of the way that entrepreneurism works, especially in the United States. But I have a number of high-tech devices that definitely use AI or AI-related things to function and are definitely pitched as innovations because of their AI involvement. And these high-tech devices were given to or implanted in people. And then the companies that built those things either chose to quote unquote brick the device, meaning make it unusable, or to sell the company and no longer support the device. And so in the case here on the bottom left, we have a paralyzed man who is using an exoskeleton suit. And the company that made it said, we don't service that model anymore. They absolutely had the ability to do so. They just decided to refuse. They just decided to mothball an entire repo and just let him suffer. They didn't care. The bionic eyes thing is really creepy because these are surgically implanted. And in the case of this company, didn't stop servicing the devices. They actually went out of business. I'm using air quotes for those that cannot see me. They went out of business, and what that meant was that you had people with surgically implanted devices in their heads that didn't know when they would stop working. Some of them have been able to scavenge parts from other devices, and some of them have just suddenly lost access to whatever algorithm was running their site at the time. And this is actually very common. And in fact, the FDA's approvals of AI-related technologies, most of them are radiological in nature. So we're using them a lot for computer vision of like scans, and that's actually a fairly effective use of it, although there are racial biases in that still. But everything else are these AI medical devices that are not actually getting proper clearances. They're getting fast-tracked. And they're really just venture capital speculation schemes where they're going to fold in 2 years, and whether or not that device that's been given out actually is maintained, there's no requirements for it. And it's not just in mobility or vision, it's also in hearing, it's also in cognition. I have seen studies of implants for people with Tourette's, for devices that will suppress their tics, which, by the way, they turn out to not actually enjoy that feeling very much. They've also been doing this for migraine headaches. There's a number of devices for migraine headaches that have been mothballed like this. The other impacts of these algorithms in our world today, and these are not speculative, these are things that are already happening, produce this phenomenon that I'm calling social stratification. And that is that as you embed AI or machine learning or classifiers of various kinds into different services like hiring or public benefits determinations or finance, then you wind up stratifying people based on who gets access to a service and who does not, based on things that are basically phrenology 2.0. And so if you don't know what phrenology is, because I keep coming across this not knowing that people have not all been taught about phrenology, that's a thing where they would like measure bumps in your skull and decide whether or not you were a criminal. And we still do it. We pretend like phrenology is a very silly thing we used to do, like, and it's actually something we still do. This image here from Faceception that's on the bottom right has a series of faces with like features on it, and has these different faces that are actually all the same, ironically, classified as high IQ, academic researcher, professional poker player, and I think it says terrorist. I've got a window in my way, but I'm pretty sure, yes, it does say terrorist. And I saw this several years ago. And when I went to write the book, I was like, there's no way this image is still up. And it is. And I mean, you've got to be super out of touch to keep something this wild on your front page for like over 10 years. Like, I don't, when I first saw this, I was in such disbelief, and for it to just still be there like it's no big deal is really, really wild to me. But this kind of technology is embedded in these technologies that are being used in hiring. So when you're doing a video call with your with whatever company you're interviewing for, especially if it's a large company, it's very likely to be running one of these platforms that have been advertised to these companies as like making hiring easier. And then what they claim to do is real-time personality classification based on your face. And so what reports from the Center for Democracy and Technology have found is that obviously these discriminate against disabled people because they're relying so much on facial data. Blind people do not look in certain directions. Depending on the severity of their blindness, their eyes actually move around constantly, which the algorithm classifies as untrustworthy. Many autistic people are not making the same kinds of eye contact that you might expect, and that's also being classified as untrustworthy. People with Bell's palsy or other kinds of facial palsy are being classified as different ways because their mouth isn't moving the way that the algorithm wants it to. People with facial difference are not even getting classified as people. There's an organization in the UK for facial difference, and there was a woman who was basically trapped in the DMV for several hours because they had implemented a facial recognition platform to their ID photograph thing, and they wouldn't clear her photo because her face wasn't showing up as a face. And this is, she's had a driver's license for like 20 years, so this wasn't a problem before. We added a technology and suddenly it became a problem for people, and it wasn't a problem. Like, she's a person. You don't need the computer to tell you she's a person. Anyway, so to better explain how all these things tie together, I want to discuss modes of eugenic thought, right? Because we think of eugenics as like an action that people take that is usually politically, I wouldn't necessarily say politically motivated, but politically prescribed. And it is politically motivated, but anyway. But this is actually something that is happening at all levels of our own personal thought because it has been embedded into us, right? So this idea of sorting and eliminating undesirable people happens not only at the state level, but also at the interpersonal level. You can definitely see it happening in schools. The matching and promoting of desirables. This is something that is like, you can think of it very specifically like matchmaking for marriages and breeding, but you can also think about it like social networks and how you pair quote unquote high earners with high earners, or networking about who's the best company to invest in. All these different ways of like matching people with is based on eugenic ideas about what makes a good person. Even augmenting or fixing undesirables. So this constant clinical compulsion to correct and cure disabled bodies. And this is not to say that medicine is bad. I have many medicines in my body right now. One less that I'm supposed to because I forgot to take it. But medicine, good sometimes. So this is not anti-medicine. But and this idea that like if you have a really fit person that they should be given access to more things to be the most fit. Or that we should replace undesirables. This is happening in the labor market in many nations right now. This idea that immigrant labor is undesirable and needs to be replaced. There's this new horrific term called digital immigrants, and it's not what you would think. You might think it would be people who are telecommuting to work. No, they mean robots. They mean AI. They're calling AI digital immigrants, which is basically a way of saying like this kind of labor replacement is satisfactory to us because it doesn't involve a new brown person being in our country. It's a big yikes. But the most important mode of eugenic thought I want to talk about is self-hate, because this is actually how we wind up doing eugenics to each other and to ourselves, right? So we talk about what makes people do these things. When some order comes from on high, that's like a reprehensible order, what makes people do it? Sometimes it's that they agree, right? And other times it's that they have been convinced of their own inadequacy, that they, out of fear, they believe that if they do the thing that they will be desirable, they'll be lovable, and they'll be safe. And so our self-hatred creates what we call splash damage for other people. And that is how we perpetuate eugenics in our society, is we punish people for the things we hate about ourselves. And this is what I refer to as meta-eugenics. And this is those internalized beliefs that are embedded in our public consciousness that make these consequences seem natural and inevitable and even good. So this idea that people should be captured by the state and sent to detainment centers, or that people should be more likely to die from COVID, or should be more likely to be exposed and not cared for during COVID. These are all things, these shoulds have been embedded in us, and they're not real, and we can choose differently. But one of the things that makes meta-eugenics so effective is that we do it to ourselves. And so this would be like, I've heard people say, well, if I got that sick, I would want to die. And it's this way that we have constructed a belief about what life is and should be that makes it impossible for us to imagine another kind of life as being worth having. And if we think that it would be okay for us to die, then it's okay if we watch that person die. Right? Like, well, if that happened to me, I would want to die. Then you don't save that person, regardless of how that person feels about whether or not they would like to live. So there's this important discussion that happens in AI about like what's wrong with it, and this idea that like AI would be fine, but we're using it wrong. And so this was a viral tweet at the time when Twitter was still, you could still open it without immediately hating yourself. You know what the biggest problem of pushing all things AI is? Wrong direction. I want AI to do my laundry and dishes so that I can do art and writing, not for AI to do my art and writing so that I can do my laundry and dishes. And this quote is from Joanna Masijuska, and this, on its face, this is a very reasonable quote. We all have a lot of anxiety about these LLMs and generative image makers taking over the field of artistic expression. They don't really take over the field of artistic expression, but they do take away job opportunities. And it has been a very quick turnaround for people that never really valued the arts in the first place to just get a generative AI model to make something for them and call it good enough because they never cared about it in the first place. Some people, you know, argued back with Joanna, and I think that they should have, about whether or not this was the right frame. I think probably a number of people were like, well, we do have AI for doing dishes, it's called a dishwasher. But Joanna says this post isn't about wanting an actual laundry robot. It's about wishing that AI focused on taking away those tasks we hate. And this is where Joanna actually says the thing. I don't think that Joanna realized that she was saying the thing, but this is the thing. This is actually the whole problem, right? Is that we have tasks that we hate. Who decides what makes a contemptible task, and who decides which people deserve to do a contemptible task? This is where our whole problem comes in. This has been our labor ethics problem from the beginning. This image was made famous by Ruha Benjamin, who put it in her book, Race After Technology. And it is an image from Mechanics Illustrated. This is only half of the layout, because the rest of it says you will have slaves. And it talks about having robot slaves in the future, and it's okay. We don't mean real slaves, we mean robot slaves. And you've got this man who's got like a butler robot and like a valet robot taking care of him, getting him dressed and making him food, which is oddly also what a lot of times the wife would have to do. So you have like a weird, like, it's either a servant or a wife, but it's never him. He can't possibly dress himself or make his own eggs or get his own cigarettes. But what you see here is that the robots don't take away the problem, and the problem is that we desire slaves. We desire slaves without the moral injury of enslavement. we still want something to be in servitude to us. For some reason, we have come into this culture of wanting to be served, rather than some other kind of collective communal arrangement of organizing a society and living our lives together. We want hierarchy, but we know that it is unpalatable to want a person to serve us. So now we're imagining somehow that the robots can do it and that won't be real enslavement. Theoretically, I guess if you want to like never imagine that robots become sentient, because like that's not even a problem I want to worry about right now. If they were truly just machines, right? You still have a problem, because how did those machines come to be? We don't have machines making machines. Even in our most high-tech factories, we have exploited labor making machines. We have human beings dying in mines for the rare earth minerals that are inside of our batteries and our mobile phones. This is discussed heavily in the work by Gray and Shuri and Ghost Work. This whole concept of robotics trying to replace service work and actually just creating more work for women or gender minorities is discussed very heavily in More Work for Mother by Ruth Cohen. And all of this causes something that's called a labor displacement and reinstatement. This is by Acemoglu and Restrepo. And what happens is you have some kind of innovation, right, that creates a labor void that you're supposed to be able to fill with leisure. But instead, what happens is some people maybe get some free time out of this, but actually the work that created that void actually just gets moved and reinstated elsewhere where you can't see it. So the service and the human exploitation. So I don't really care about the idea that the robots will become people that we are then exploiting. That may actually happen, but right now we're still exploiting people. So let's keep focusing on that. Every time we get a new technological convenience, we're actually displacing the abuse that we can't see anymore. We used to be able to see it, now we can't see it. And that makes it easier for us to ignore it. So we need to be aware of this idea of these conveniences, these automated conveniences. Where does this automation actually come from? How does it really work? Where are the exploited human beings in this chain of convenience? What are these actual effects? And of course, it's not only human exploitation, it's also environmental exploitation, but those things are hand in hand. Okay, so you destroy the environment, you destroy people, you destroy people, you destroy the environment. I'm commonly met with the argument that I should stop complaining because these technologies will make things better for disabled people. This idea that like once you can identify some marginalized group that benefits from the technology, now the technology is unassailable and you can't critique it anymore. And so in the book, I call this the disability diversion. And this is this thing that when you dismiss all criticism by appealing to its use case for disability. But these use cases often center able-bodied ideals about what would make a good technology for disabled people. Liz Jackson calls these disability dongles. It's a very good work. My name is also on it, but I didn't really, it's Liz's, okay? It's Liz's, thank you. Ignoring the complexity of how technology may itself be disabling, okay? So not only the technological ecosystem and its exploitation causing disability in its wake, but also like that, for example, when we don't study medicines well enough, they also cause disability. When we don't support people in using their mobility devices well enough, they acquire new disabilities through the ineffective use of the mobility equipment. Or even that just having adaptive equipment doesn't make you not disabled. It changes the nature of your disability. It doesn't make it go away. It just changes the flavor to something that maybe you can navigate the world with better. And then also these things ignore the sociopolitical context of disablement. And what I mean by that, and I'll talk about more on the next slide, is that a lot of times they will use a disability diversion to imagine some kind of use case that will make the world better for disabled people that doesn't involve actually making the world better for disabled people. It's like a Band-Aid on top of a problem. And so like an example of that would be when people say, oh, well, the AI will correctly interpret all of the images that don't have alt text, and now blind people will be able to equitably use the internet. What you're saying when you say that is that we don't have to get people to do a better job of making alt text. We can just get the robot to do it. AI might get better at identifying certain objects in the image, but the AI can never figure out what the intent of the image was in context with the text. So the actual communicative intent of the image is only known by the person who posts it, and it is their responsibility to learn how to make alt text, because they're the only ones that can tell you why that image is important. There is a communication that is happening through that image that is more than just what's in the image. And the AI is never going to get that, ever. I don't care how smart it gets. It doesn't know why. I'll take a minute to talk about why are LLMs working, because I get a lot of complaints from my fellow neurodivergent people that use LLMs about they feel attacked, and I don't want them to feel attacked, because again, I do not condemn individual people's use of these tools. I do personally feel ill anytime somebody suggests that I enter a prompt into something and I don't do it. But I consider myself like a non-belligerent vegan. I do eat meat, but I mean like an LLM vegan. Okay. The LLMs are working because what they're doing for neurodivergent people in particular, and also for people for whom English is a second language or not their favorite language, they take what others would describe as a jumbled series of thoughts and pulls out what looks like a respectable sequence of text. Basically, it takes neurodivergent and English as second language rhetoric and prose and turns it normative. And this is why sometimes these tools are working to get people access to spaces that are typically set up to exclude them, right? So for example, a lot of my international students will say that the faculty only answer their emails when they're written by LLMs. And I believe that. And that's awful. But the fact that people are finding utility in an LLM to gain access to an exclusionary society is not praise for AI, but a condemnation of society. And that is the point that I want to make. This is not about you're a bad person because you used an LLM to get access to a bad system. No, it's the system is bad, and I would like for us to continue to remember that, even as these LLMs make it easier for us to hack the system. Okay, so just because we're able to use this tool to trick somebody into giving us access doesn't mean that the fight is over. And this brings us to this concept of the orphan crushing machines, which was originally in a tweet, again, before the complete and utter collapse of Twitter, by Anasagnosio Genesis, or Puko Blinky. Why do I have both of those names? I don't remember. But anyway, that person, they wrote this tweet about the orphan crushing machine, and now it's become a meme of something that you use whenever you see a heartwarming story presented as or as a charitable moment presented as a heartwarming story while failing to condemn the social conditions that made the moment possible. An example was that a child had donated, or had his make-a-wish was to have a free food kitchen for the homeless people in his community, and it's presented as like this heartwarming story, and it is obviously wonderful that a child is like, I want to feed the people in my neighborhood. That's great. But also, like, why does the kid have to use his cancer wish to feed people? Why we not feed people though? Like, right? And so it's the idea of saying, oh, yay, they rescued the orphan from the orphan crushing machine. but the machine is still running and there are still orphans being crushed. That's the meme for the orphan crushing machine. And so Bill Gates has a version of this that he says in an interview, which I guess we'll talk about more in another slide, which is that intelligence is rare, he says. A great doctor, a great teacher, and with AI over the next decade, that will become free, commonplace, cat. A great medical advice, tutoring. It's kind of profound because it solves all these specific problems, like we don't have enough doctors or mental health professionals. So to Bill Gates, AI is a solution to a lack of professionals that we have because we refuse to fund education and that we refuse to fund these professions. We don't have adequate pay for teachers, so we don't have enough teachers. We don't have adequate support for the educational cost of professions like mental health care providers or doctors, and so we don't have enough doctors. And so we're going to solve it by giving poor people access to an inferior, very fallible, very terrifying robot. That's social stratification again. So here's my whole slide devoted to how much I hate Bill Gates. And I'm not gonna, I don't know, I guess I will read this whole thing because it's funny when I read it, I guess. If it's not, sorry, suffer. So this was in an interview that Bill Gates did with Jimmy Fallon. And he says, you know, the era that we're just starting, intelligence is rare. You know, a great doctor, a great teacher, and with AI over the next decade, that will become free, commonplace, you know, great medical advice, tutoring, and it's kind of profound because it solves all these specific problems, like we don't have enough doctors or mental health professionals. And it brings with it so much change, you know, like what will jobs be like? What will we just work 2 or 3 days a week? I love the way it'll drive innovation forward. But I think, you know, it's a little bit unknown. Will we be able to shape it? And so legitimately people are like, wow, this is a little bit scary. It's completely new territory. And Fallon says, will we still need humans? And Bill Gates says, not for most things. And the audience actually audibly inhales. And Jimmy Fallon covers his mouth in that like cute little way that he does. And Bill Gates immediately goes, we'll decide. And Jimmy Fallon is saying, you know, hosting a talk show, definitely we're still gonna need, you know, the idea that like his job is safe as a good joke, it's the bit. And Gates says, you know, we'll decide, like baseball. We won't want to watch computers play baseball. So there'll be some things that we reserve for ourselves, but in terms of making things and moving things and growing food, over time, those will become basically solved problems. What I want us all to think about when we hear stuff like this is who's we? So here I have the image of the angry goose meme, and we have, we'll decide what we want to reserve for ourselves, and the goose is saying, who's we? He chases the man and says, who's we, Bill? I almost put this in the book, but I did not. So anyway. So the social stratification engines, this is where other people are deciding for us what we have access to, what kinds we have access to, and when. This is like the healthcare professional that said that he didn't think that AI healthcare was in his family's healthcare journey, but he was mandating healthcare bots in all levels of his own system. Who gets access to these great teachers or great doctors and who's only given the automated version, and that thus becomes an obligatory data subject. Who gets to opt out is going to be a major source of basically a new data class. I skipped over that because data centers are big and scary and bad, the end. Like I want to take a minute to talk about the ecological impacts of AI, because I figured out a little while ago like what causes our inability to understand the problem. Everybody remembers like learning the water cycle in like middle school or whatever. Elementary school too, probably. But anyway, so you learn the water cycle, right? This idea of like evaporation, condensation, and precipitation, right? And you don't learn about the time scale. And so you just think like, oh, water's constantly recycling itself, like it's fine. And that's true, but it takes like 100 years. And then if you use all of the water that's there now, it's not going to get back inside the ground for 100 years. You're going to die. It doesn't work like that. Like, so this is why the massive water consumption of the data centers is a real problem. And there are other industries that consume vast amounts of water. AI is definitely doing it more. And every time we promise a new data center, we are committing ourselves to more loss of water. And all you have to do is look at the places where some of these other industries already exist. So the intense agricultural use of water in like almond farming in California and other kinds of farming in California, they're already rationing their water, and they have been for decades. It's not fun. So what can we do about it? And I promise I'm almost done. I've really had a hard time. I'm usually like notorious for having too few slides, and that has ended. Anyway, I want people to start thinking about what their role is in relation to various technologies, and to understand that their role changes throughout the day and in context. So when you're holding your phone, like, you're a user of that phone, okay? But when you are running a business or administering a school, you're a client. You're purchasing technology systems for use in your workplace. When you are a technology developer or designer, you're a builder. I use the word builder because we get all these like fights about who's an engineer and who's a developer, and I don't fucking care. You're a builder, okay? And that means you get some authority over what happens in the actual system, what the features actually are and do. Now, there are executives above builders that give you specifications that you technically have to listen to, but here's the secret: sometimes they don't actually know what you do for a living. And if they give you a bad order, there are many clever ways to say no. And yes, some of those ways of saying no result in you losing your job, and that is up to you to decide whether or not you can do that. Researchers are weird because sometimes they're users, sometimes they're clients, sometimes they're builders. Like, they're doing all of these weird different roles depending on what aspect of the research they're working on and how they're doing it. And that's why I gave them their own category. Also, they just like to have their own category. Reporters, these are the obvious, like the people that are doing literal reports, like articles, news articles, even like influencers, and anybody who's basically praising AI right now uncritically is doing a bad job. But where we've sort of lost the investigative nature of journalism, and that's a big problem. And then governors, I don't mean like the governor of whatever state, but obviously them too. But I also mean like administrators, the people that set policy in whatever institution or organization is being discussed at the time, right? So a hospital administrator is a governor. The provost is a governor. The state government governors, federal government governors, lots of governors, policy people, right? I wanted to specify governance because AI governance is becoming a term that we're using more now. And policy, sometimes you are talking about the people that try to influence policy, and sometimes you're talking about the people that actually get to decide policy. And I wanted to make it clear that like the people that decide policy have a role. But what do you do with those roles is these steps within the context, right? So for any given technology that you're interacting with based on your role, you got to figure out what are the actual inputs and outputs, what happens to that input, and how does it get output? What does it mean at the end? And like, what does your role have to do with that, right? So for example, a user can decide to turn off location services. A user can decide not to tag any of their photos. A user can decide to turn off Google's auto tagging. But the powers that builders have are different. You have to observe those systems and human impacts. And by observe, I also mean listening to other people. So when somebody tells you this system hurt me, listen. It's really important to assess the claims versus the outcomes. So like, what's being sold to you and what is actually happening? Every role throughout the day, you have the power to do that assessment in the context. A homeowner who's like choosing to install a smart thermostat can actually evaluate whether or not it's giving them the functionality that it says it is, or if they're really just providing a bunch of data to a company and not actually getting value out of the system. They can figure that out. And then every role, even if you're not a builder, you have the power to rewrite your role in the system. And some of this rewriting, I do literally mean refusal. Like, just don't do it. Don't use the LLM, maybe. But also maybe change the way you use it, or the criteria for when it's acceptable to you to use it, or the number of times you agree to use it in a day, or you know, whether or not you use Face ID on your phone. Like, you can make little decisions that disrupt the system. Because, like, you know, I have these big roles in here, like executives and governors, and the truth is, most of these people, we're not going to change their minds. They're not going to change their behavior because their behavior is motivated entirely by capital. But the rest of us can make different decisions, and at scale, and we can do stuff. Okay, I know that we've been taught recently that boycotting doesn't work, but it's not really true, actually. We've been sort of conditioned and domesticated to believe that our individual actions don't add up to anything, but they're not individual actions. We live in a society. We are a community of people. We can do these things together. Anyway, smash your ring camera. I want to take a minute to be mad about alignment, because there's a lot of talk about values alignment in AI and that this will somehow solve our problem. So if we can somehow build the system to be aligned with our values, then it will never behave badly. As if the bad things that happen from AI are actually eccentric behavior that we didn't account for and not like literally built into the system. But values alignment always assumes a universal set of values. It comes right back to the problem of who decides, and it also assumes good faith actors, and we do not have those. The values of the user may be in conflict with the values or even the lives of the people affected by that use. And yes, this can mean people that are using LLMs, their values are in conflict with the people whose water their prompts are drinking. So please consider that AI is not a new problem. It is a mirror. AI shows us our values. Please see the work of Damian Patrick Williams for this. He's very good at it and does not get enough recognition for it. If a man like Bill Gates can say intelligence is rare in the context of an AI conversation, that tells you that we have a problem with how we valorize and conceptualize intelligence. You know, while we consider these to be one-off eccentric accidents, things like when Gemini says somebody, "You're not needed, please die," like, that's not the robots rising up to overtake us. That is literally what we believe about ourselves, because the data that runs these LLMs is our own chats. So it's not surprising that these robots would tell us to kill ourselves sometimes. I know that we're out of time, so I'm just going to stop, because most of this was just like, be a better person. Please read Menace to the Future if you want to know why prison is eugenics. Say no to stuff. If you hate yourself enough, then you will think technology will save you from yourself, and then you will make bad choices. So please stop hating yourself. I love you. Thank you. Don't worry so much about what you meant to do. If you're too wrapped up in it, but I didn't mean to hurt anybody, then you can't actually do anything. You're too stuck on defending yourself, and you're not actually working towards making a better world. So throw it out the window. It does not matter. Okay? Just stand up today and make a different choice. It doesn't matter. Okay. There's a book. Buy it, I guess. Hi. Questions. This is how I always end my talks, like, it's over. Okay.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that. I'm trying to figure out how to clap and speak at the same time, and so far I'm failing. So I hope that lots of folks have questions, and we're going to take questions in two different ways. You can write your question in the chat, and you could also raise your hand, and I can sort of promote you to panelist if you're sort of feeling bold, and you can join us. And I can either open up your mic so you could speak, or you can also go on video. You can let me know. So do we have any questions? Any questions? Okay, looks like Olivia. Olivia, I've sent you an unmute request, and I also have given you a panel request.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi,
Okay.
go ahead with your question.
Yeah, okay. It might be more of a statement, but I just wanted to say thank you to Dr. Williams for this talk. We read your book in Dr. Lizaraza's class. I loved it. It was really accessible for me as a reader who is just sort of being introduced to these concepts, and also your PowerPoint slide tonight really enforced all the important ideas that I read in the book. And I just wanted to let you know one of the parts that stood out to me the most in the book was in one of the later chapters where you write about this interaction that you had about this like AI system that people were asking you to develop for children, and this tool, and how you and your coworkers were like grappling with that, and how you were trying to protect and defend our children because they are a vulnerable group that is often overlooked in some of the literature that I've seen about um like AI and how can we get digital justice. You know, children are a very important part of that conversation. And I was so glad to see you representing that in the book, and the way that you pointed out that sort of manipulating and getting this data from children was the point of these researchers, and they were frustrated that you were trying to protect that. Um, and you also pointed out a lot about how the social stratification part, right, where like wealthier children get to have those tools that Bill Gates thinks are going to be so wonderful for our classrooms, and then our lower class children are used as like you know, you talk about them as like cogs in the machine, right, and their data is the ones being collected. And I just thought that was really profound and made me think about justice for our children in the digital world in different ways. And so I just wanted to say thank you and let you know what resonated with me from that.
Thank you. I will speak a little bit about that that sort of story that you're referencing, where I was trying to work with these people to like, you can have the good things about the system that you're proposing without the surveillance data collection part. And like that's when they basically ghosted us. It's like, okay. And that's actually true of all of our systems. Like we can have a lot of the things that drive our technologies that we're told we can't have without the bad things of AI. It's not true. We can, a lot of the conveniences that we get out of our phone does not actually require that that data be constantly stored and used later for unknown things. This idea that like everything has to be remembered forever instead of, and this is something, you know, GDPR is trying to do it, but like they have like a 3-year timeline and it literally only needs to be like 15 minutes. Like that's how long they need our data for the purpose that they've said they want it. They keep it for longer to do other shit. And it's like, they don't actually need to, but they do to make a profit, because the whole profit has become on this like speculation on data is like the new oil. And it's like, but it's weird because instead of finding oil, you can make it. You can just make the data by making a system that creates data out of people's activities. And it's like very creepy and bad. Yay, such a great time to be alive. We're at war, by the way. Yay. I have a question, but not able to ask it verbally, if that's okay. This is from Maria Page. Is there any equivalent of an IRB for the use of AI in research, or the use of AI with people and applications concerned about who is susceptible to mental health issues and suicidality, among other things, in the general population, with chatbot use, or, for example, or cognitive decline or cognitive surrender? So there's absolutely nothing like the IRB for products. Like there's like, I mean, that's not necessarily true, but it is true in the case of like these software technologies. We've never really gotten a handle on software and like safety standards. So like the things that we have for physical products don't apply to these things, and we really haven't figured it out. And IRB also is extremely ineffective in the research level anyway. So yeah, this is where the only time we sort of resolve some of these issues in software has been through lawsuits, which takes a number of years and a number of deaths or other kinds of harm first. It's very frustrating that that's how the law operates. And also like the harm happens to a very large number of poor people before somebody rich enough can go sue. And that's kind of like the other thing about it that's very frustrating. Um, so no, there's not. There hasn't been. And this is basically what governments are supposed to be for. Regulations are supposed to do this, but they do not do this because everybody's bought and paid for by a capitalist. So I'm aware I'm being recorded. Anarchist on Main. So like it's no, this is why I try to get us to do it. Because that's what we got. We got us. Okay? We don't have anybody else.
I saw that someone had their hand up. Would you mind putting your question in the chat? I'm having a minor technical issue.
Okay, I will wait for Sienna to type their questions.
Let me fix my technical issue here.
I can ask a question. Oh,
Mm-hmm.
Marjorie is asking.
Okay, so Marjorie has a question about general thoughts on the concept of AI literacy and whether or not you see any connections to the eugenics problem. So any project of literacy will sometimes have a very fun eugenic legacy hidden underneath it, but it's sort of like a double-edged kind of thing where like everybody should actually be able to read stuff, period. Right? But also we shouldn't deny people access to things because we haven't given them the resources to learn the literacy, right? So you got like both things going on. But AI literacy has been a very weird project because every time I try to do research on AI literacy, the people that are in charge are like, no, not like that. Because they don't want real AI literacy, just like they don't want people to actually be able to identify mis and disinformation. Okay, so for example, I work at Purdue University, and they're the first university that did like a AI competency requirement, and all of our plans of study had to be changed in order to implement some sort of criteria for meeting an AI competency requirement, even if our degree was already in that, but fine. And what they mean by that is that these can become effective workers in a marketplace dominated by AI. They don't mean people that can understand like the SOAR framework. They don't mean people that can identify what a system takes in, how it processes it, what it puts out. They don't mean how can you assess whether or not the company is selling you something and not actually delivering it to you. They don't mean that kind of literacy. just like any culture that actually wanted literacy would not be banning books. Like they don't want the literacy that would actually help us be effective in like controlling the way AI influences us. So every time you see an AI literacy project, I get real suspicious. That doesn't mean that I throw it out, but I'm like, who's really, what kind of literacy and for whom and what do you mean exactly? And oftentimes it's just like prompt engineering. And I'm like, that's not literacy. Anyway. I wanted to see, okay. Oh my God, it's Greta. So Kay Gallagher says, with the idea of undesirable tasks, do you think that there are tasks right now that are already being treated as undesirable tasks with workers being replaced by AI? I mean, obviously, I say it in the book, but the AI companies are replacing arts and literature because those are the tasks that capital hates. So, like, they're not undesirable to us as humans, but they're undesirable to capital. Cultural production is a threat to whatever dominant order there is. So that's why it's been that this is what they wanted to take over first. And also it literally like floods the zone with literal shit. Like you can't tell what's real anymore. Every time my mother sends me something, I have to watch it 3 times and be like, okay, it's not real. Like I don't always have to watch it 3 times, but you should watch it 3 times because sometimes you see things that you did not see before. So, you know, AI has gotten a lot better, but if you really look at it, it's still doing things like swapping people's legs or reversing their feet, or like it's still doing stuff anatomically wrong. It's just a different level of anatomy. Now it's more biomechanical than it is like too many fingers, which does still happen, by the way. But there's this whole problem of using AI to replace entry-level work in general, and then being like, oh no, now there are no more experts. Imagine. Yeah, I mean, there's just so many things that it's replacing. Well, a lot of it has to do with like, well, if we put a machine on it, then when it makes a decision that makes us feel bad, we don't have to take responsibility for it. That's why insurance companies were like the first ones to do this. They were like, we can make the machine deny all the services and then just say, sorry, I don't know. It just says no, sorry. It like disempowers the people working at the insurance companies. They're no longer able to bend the rules as much on an individual basis. They're actually trapping their own workers. And it's a whole thing.
So I have solved my problem, which is of course user error. And so I have promoted Sienna A. I believe you had your hand up.
Yes, I did. Just
Sorry
as I
we made
finished
you.
typing it, but these would
Sorry we
probably
made
be.
you type it, and then yes.
No, it's fine. These are probably questions that I think would be better asked out loud, with maybe an aspect of discussion. So, number one, while you were speaking, I kept finding myself, especially you talking about the like undesirable labor and that kind of gap there. I kept finding myself thinking back to the like very recent problem of enshittification, where companies just are making consumers accept worse and worse quality products. And I was wondering if you at all had any connections between those two concepts, because I could definitely also see that being a related problem to the current standards about AI.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so actually some recent developments have demonstrated the like enshittification process on the LLMs. Like they're going to start adding ads, which we knew was coming, or there's payment tiers. Gemini has recently reduced the number of queries that you can make a day. without paying for it, etc. And so shittification has like two mechanisms, right? It's not just providing shittier and shittier products, it's also baiting and switching and making you pay for shittier and shittier products. Because it's the shittiness that makes them the most money. And it's not just from like a manufacturing perspective of like, if you make a product more cheaply, then you make more money on it. Like that's one thing. That's like basic economics. But then the other thing is, like Facebook. If you make Facebook shittier, but people are still trapped in it, the shittiness that they have done is actually make you exposed to more and more ads and less people. Right? And so like you're still wading through the shit to get to people because Facebook also collapsed all the other, like there's no forums anymore. Like, I mean, now people are fleeing to Discord, which is like, it'll work. But one of the problems is we also have people that like forgot what the internet was like before Facebook and like don't know how to function without. And I'm still on Facebook. I'm not like, but also it's because I've got family there and they don't know how to use other stuff. Like, like, it's sort of like, it's more like an entrapment thing. And I do talk about it, I think in chapter 3, maybe it's either 3 or 4, where I talk about infrastructure and the way that, like like the fact that the infrastructure doesn't belong to us. Like, remember when Oz went down like several weeks ago and like nothing worked because everybody passes their data through Amazon servers. And so you take down one person for 1 minute and like you can't access the internet anymore. Like that is a major problem. But it is a profitable problem, right? Like I don't know, it's wild to try to describe to people how much the internet has changed in the past like 15 years, although I guess now it's getting closer to 20. But like when I was a kid, when I was in college, there were still server closets everywhere. Like everywhere. Like your college department, whatever little business you worked for, the McDonald's, like everybody had a server closet. And now no one has a server closet. Nobody even knows what I'm talking about. Like, that's, we used to actually literally physically possess our infrastructure. We don't. It's the cloud now. And the cloud is a giant, terrifying box in the desert eating all the water. Like that's the cloud. Like, so.
I see we're running out of time, so I'm going to cut one of my questions. I just have 2 more questions. One I think a lot simpler than the other, which is I'm currently a student in a science writing course, and I would like to write about this talk. It would only be exposed to like me and my 10 classmates and my professor. Is that all right?
You can do whatever you want.
Awesome.
It's in the
Then,
cloud now, baby. Like,
oh yeah, right, of course. Um, and then the last question I had is, do you believe that the quote unquote AI bubble will burst? And because I hear a lot of talk about, oh, it's just around the corner, the AI bubble's gonna burst right now, just like we just gotta wait through it. Is that a feasible thing?
well, it's definitely something I would like to see happen, but at the same time, when bubbles burst, people get hurt. So like I don't actually want to see it happen. You know what I mean? Like when the housing bubble burst, people lost their houses. That wasn't fun. Like, um, so the I do think that there will be at least some off-gassing. But it's not going to be fun for anybody because they've trapped us. We're all trapped. This is what's really creepy about the AI bubble is how much of it is actually just another real estate bubble. Like that's what this data center shit is really about. And so it's really creepy how much it really is just like the same thing over and over again. It's not actually different or new, but it is much, much bigger. So, you know, I do think there will be some settling around, like, there's going to be a point to which it doesn't matter how quote unquote much good it gets. We're not going to be satisfied with what it does because it doesn't actually create things. But it's still going to displace a lot of work, and it's still going to change the way work happens. It's still going to make a lot of people's jobs shittier, and it's it's one of those things that's become quote unquote too big to fail, so it's going to keep getting bailed out now because all of these billionaires are all wrapped up in it and they can't lose their little bubble baby. So I don't know. I can't pretend I have any idea what's going to happen at all. Also, war now, so that's fun. Guess what fuels war? AI fuels war. Did you know that precision weapons are not less deadly? They're just, you remember that whole thing about learning the difference between precision and accuracy? Precise is not accurate, actually. Anyway, we learned that like yesterday. Everything is sad. Okay, I don't have a good. No, but we have each other. We do. But yeah, so I don't know what the bubble is going to do, but I know that none of it matters as much as what we do together. Whatever that bubble feels like is going to be dependent on what we do together.
All right, thank you.
Sorry. I want to address Greta's question real quick, which is how should institutions support the work of people taking on the "we've got us" approach? Institutions like universities, are they able to support movement building in this context? Technically, yes. Practically, because of who's actually running them, no. So I made the very controversial statement in a meeting with the president of my institution saying, did you know that universities can also unionize? Because we were talking about, and I didn't mean the people in the university, I meant the universities, like the Big Ten could unionize. Like, like when we talk about all of these McCarthyite things, the universities could all band together and say, we're not going to do that, but they won't do it, right? So, like, institutions can support people, but they can't do it while union busting, and they can't do it while refusing to actually make a coalition with other institutions, and they can't do it while complying in advance. And you know what I mean? So, like, yes, technically, institution does not de facto mean the enemy, and yet that is what our administrations have chosen. And that's why you need a union. Yay. It's in the cloud now.
So we are just about out of time, but we also started late, so I'm sort of tempted to see if Anya, did you want to ask your question?
Sure, sure. First, I wanted to thank you because I've been anti-AI, haven't ever used ChatGPT, but I didn't have like enough arguments to back like a lot of my decisions up. So I feel that after reading your book, I'm like, okay, I'm ready. Especially after seeing like how many people in higher education are using AI. And I don't mean students, I mean faculty and administrators, which you mentioned this, but what I really liked was about like your connection between self-hate and eugenics and AI. And I was wondering like what's the role of higher education in creating this self-hate and also fueling the use of AI, and how do we say no to AI in academia? Because I feel like how do you do
Yeah.
anything of this?
So personally, in my classroom, I mostly say no to policing AI. Like, I'm not going to decide whether or not you used it. I don't have time for that. It's absolutely enraging that I even have to think about it every time I read somebody's work, and I refuse to do it. I'm going to grade what you gave me. But guess what? If you gave me AI slop, it's going to be a shit grade. Like, but I used to say before AI was like before LLMs, right? I would try to explain to people that like cheating is a symptom. So cheating is a symptom of an unmet need, right? And so you've got students that are panicking because they are working full time and they don't have enough time to study. They never really learned how to study. They are like coming into an awareness that they have certain cognitive disabilities that they didn't know that they had before, or that they were told that they didn't have and they do, or they lost their papers or whatever. Like, so you have people that are panicking because of that. You have people that are dealing with housing instability. You have people that are dealing with domestic violence. Like, this is the thing that like other professors often don't believe me because they've never had a student tell them. And I'm like, well, you should probably think about why no student has ever told you, because you definitely had students in your class that did not have food or housing or were not safe in their own homes. You definitely had that, and they didn't tell you, and you should be worried that they didn't tell you. And this LLM stuff is the same thing. The use of these LLMs in these is a desperation, and that desperation is a symptom of an unmet need. And it is absolutely higher education's fault. The way that we run our classes, the way that we do our pedagogy, the way that we literally try to punish students every step of the way, that everything we do is about like a trial through fire. That is what causes them to turn to this magic box thing. And if students are not afraid, then they might not feel like they need to use the box anymore. The other thing though is sometimes they're in the wrong place. Like, the student doesn't actually want to be in that major. That's actually really common. But actually helping them find where they want to be is a big part of that. And it's just like, if there's so many reasons why they're using it and it's not because it's actually good for them, but we create the conditions of their desperation. And I can try to make my classroom better, but we do need other people. I need my colleagues to make their classrooms better.
I think that's a great place to stop and thank our speaker. Thank you so much for sharing your research with us, and also for sharing this wisdom about educational institutions and the role of AI in education. It gives us great hope, I think, that you're out there among us, and
I'm in the cloud, everyone.
We
all over it.
Not only in the cloud but in real life. And we are in this position in history to decide what role these tools are going to play as users, if not also as clients and researchers. So thank you so much. This is absolutely wonderful, and I hope everybody goes out to get the book. And I believe you put a discount code in the chat.
I did, and the last time I checked, it was still working.
So okay. And yeah, thanks everybody for coming, and please join us for our that HCST has an event a week from today on the philosophy of addiction, and you can see our website for more information on that. It's an evening event, so hopefully some of you can join us next week. All right, thank you so much. I have to say, as people sort of run out, if you need to run, you could run. I don't want to.
I haven't been yelled at yet, but I'm sure
okay.
that I just haven't, that I've missed it. Yes, I do have a 603, please come down message from person.
Nice request. Well, I really resonated with what you said across the talk, but this discussion about education is,
yes,
yeah, this no policing. I've just wholeheartedly embraced that, and I'm so much happier because of it.
Yeah, I can't be an abolitionist and then be like trying to find out if you used the evil mom robot. I can't.
Yeah.
With AI, because they sell you that too, right? So
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Thank you so much.
Especially, I'm going to use the AI to detect the AI. Yeah.
Yeah. And then being accused of AI anyway. And like, that's anyway, whatever. So,
Yeah.
okay.
Thank you
you
so much.
Have a wonderful evening.
Yeah, you too.
Goodbye.
Bye, Blake. Feel better.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you so
Bye,
much.
everyone.